Yeah, my name's Aaron Holly. A little bit about myself. Say as a youngster, the things that I loved the most were athletics, comic books, and Dungeons and Dragons. Grew up a typical geek. Um, but those last two things, I would say, really contributed. They sort of formed a lot of who I am today. The Dungeons and Dragons with the theater of the mind and storytelling. The same with comic books, like an interest in art and visual creativity. So yeah, those are two things that I strongly credit for the person that I am today and the things that I chose to pursue creatively. So by the time I left finished high school, I knew I wanted to work in a creative field in the entertainment industry, particularly in the film industry. But more than 20 years ago, when I finished high school, it was Jurassic Park had not been made. Like there wasn't CG. It just didn't exist at that time, and there was no clear pathway into those fields. And visual effects was something that I was really interested in. I grew up loving the movies of Ray Harryhausen, Phil Tippett, stop motion animation. So I actually originally entered UCLA studying a combination of mechanical engineering and computer science called cybernetics, because I thought like, oh, they're using animatronics, let me do that. Absolutely hated it, and switched over to doubling in graphic design and philosophy. And the philosophy throws people, but I think a lot of people will find that people who entered the industry 2 decades ago during my initial era, that there were no pathways into the industry. There wasn't a gnomon. Most people didn't know the names of people working in the industries. I just sort of had to, fumble my way through it. But, luckily, like those two majors satisfied two aspects of that, that puzzle. The graphic design, I learned basic, fundamental, design skills, art skills. I also had an instructor who, whenever we would present something, and I still remember it to this day, he would always ask us when we would explain why we did something, he would tell us, examine your assumptions. So he, the design taught me how to question everything creatively. Like, why am I doing this? Why are they doing that? And then with the philosophy, that was just something I loved. But it turns out like one of the fundamental things in philosophy is drilling down to the core level questions. Because without solving those, you can't solve the bigger question. And even in the creative fields, like if I'm building a rig or troubleshooting something, it's these complex issues involving, the shaders department and animation. You have to drill down to, okay, what are the fundamental problems? And the same is true for most creative industries. If you have a weak log line, your script is probably going to be weak as well. So you have to solve the fundamental questions first. After UCLA, actually toward the end of UCLA, my senior year, I took classes in the 2D animation program. And that's when lightning struck for me. That's when I said, oh, this is seeing things move, like images. That's sort of reminded me of what I wanted to do. Took a year off and then went to graduate school and got an MFA in computer-related art and animation. So there I strengthened my fundamental skills, sculpting, figure drawing. And I definitely lean more toward the artistic, although the kind of work I do does require the technical. Got my MFA and then entered the visual effects industry at Tippett Studio, which fortunately that's, like earlier I mentioned, Tippett and Harryhausen. He was one of the people that drove me into the industry. He brought me, he sparked that initial fire in me. And so it was quite an honor to work with him. And also Tippett, I also feel fortunate to have started at Tippett. It was a place where you would get very pointed feedback on your work, but you knew it was an environment where people were always there just to make your work better. when they gave you a comment, you knew it wasn't to cut you down, it was to make you better. And so I'm very glad that I worked first in an environment like that. So, it also taught me to show things early, don't not be fearless, but to, be confident in your work and to hopefully be confident with the people that you're working with as well, that they have the same goals of professionalism and perfectionism as you have. So, from Tippett, I've spent 20 years working at various studios in visual effects and feature animation, which is quite fortunate to have, both ends of the spectrum. And you spent a year working at a major studio in China, just, out of curiosity, just to see what that growing industry is like, which is quite interesting. And my recent journey, I'm really intrigued by the real-time technology. I just recently finished the Unreal Fellowship. Yeah, so that's, my current journey, which sort of brings me back to tools to help me with storytelling. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, and I feel fortunate. I think I've had a really fun and interesting career. I also sort of take the tact of, there aren't, mistakes. You just sort of move on from the decisions you've made. But I would say, stay curious. It's always, which is something I think that I've been able to do fairly well. But, and a part of that staying curious is also being fearless, not being reckless, but as you gain experience and as you work with people around you who are equally or more experienced, hopefully, you have the confidence and the support to try new things. So those are two things that go hand in hand, and those are two things that I would tell my younger self. Um, in terms of changes, I would also tell my younger self to pursue storytelling earlier in my career. That's, about a decade into my career in visual effects, I realized, hey, I kind of got into this because I wanted to tell stories. And I found out that I was helping others tell their stories, but not being creative on my own. So that's something that I would have chosen to start pursuing earlier in my career. I always love seeing a story well told. I love the movies. I love, what's coming out in streaming TV. So I just like storytelling, even still. So that's something that motivates me. And, also, the new innovations, and new challenges in the industries. Like some of the projects that I remember most, like Avatar being one of them. Like I really felt that we were doing something completely different with the muscle simulation and some of the tech that Weta was working on. It's over a decade old now. The tech, but keeping that in mind, if you go back and watch that movie, it was quite groundbreaking. I felt like I was doing something unique. Um, and even now with the real-time technology, like Unreal Engine, Unity, that even that, it's new technology and it's quite exciting for that reason for me, but it still goes to a tool that's a means to the storytelling ends. So it always comes back. I still want to tell stories, and so I'm sort of taking this journey and learning real-time tools and technology and virtual cinematography to enable me to, get deeper into short films, episodic animation, and that type of thing.